Hello everybody, I promised a video today and I'm here to deliver. I wanted to share with you today these incarnadine beauties. These are known as Bengal currants and they have a surprisingly interesting bit of English culinary history behind them. So I wanted to talk about these beautifully sanguine fruits known as Bengal currants because they've got a surprisingly interesting English culinary history that I wasn't expecting to find. Now, I get a lot of weird fruits delivered to my doorstep, especially here in Southeast Asia. I'll find a lot of stuff online. Some of it's like jungle forage. There's barely an intelligible English description even on translation software, let alone a Wikipedia entry. And so I'll just get them delivered and kind of figure out what the hell they are, and that's really exciting to me. Now these aren't quite as obscure. These are known as kuranda, karandas plum, stuff like that. And they come in different colors. I've got the ripe ones, but they also come in kind of pinkish, whitish green, in which case, in this part of the world, they're often used in salads and pickles. Now let me give you a little close-up view of this. I don't know if you can see this. I'll cut in some B-roll of me fondling the fruit if you can't, but it's got kind of a thick skin, almost like a jujube or a sloe. But the dry exterior kind of belies how juicy they are, especially the ripe ones. And I'll cut one open for you to see. Sometimes they give off a little bit of latex, and they've got some, but they're really juicy. You can see there. And they've got almost kind of papery seeds inside. My initial impressions on the taste are kind of like almost a sour English Morello cherry. But why am I talking to you about this today? Well, as I do with a lot of ingredients I get in, I start to look for references for them in my books and my culinary books that I have. And there was a footnote that caught my interest and kind of my jaw dropped a little bit because it mentioned that the Bengal currant was a major constituent of what was known as the Great Hedge of India. And I was like, what the fuck is the Great Hedge of India? It's exactly what you might think. It's the most bizarre British Empire project that's relatively unknown. And I'll pause here for a little bit and give you a brief history of the Great Hedge of India in case you don't know. So what was the Great Hedge and why was it built? Or why do the Brits build anything? Taxes.
Oh, you have tuppence.
I mean, some things never change, eh? And at the time, as the British were expanding across India, they needed to raise revenue, and the major revenue generator was a salt tax. So salt coming from the south of the country up to the north. And so a series of custom houses were put in place that became known as the Inland Customs Line. But as the Brits took over more territory, as it expanded, there were gaps in the customs line. Smugglers were getting through and able to evade the taxes. So a longer term, more permanent solution was required. So the best heads in the industry got together in the British East India Company, and what should we do? Should we build a wall? No, that would make too much sense. Should we build a canal? No, also too much sense. Too cheap. How about this? We'll build the world's largest hedge. I kid you not, this hedge was enormous. To give you a sense of the scale, at its peak, it spanned over 2,000 kilometers, was 12 foot high, 14 foot thick, employed over 14,000 people to maintain. If it weren't an organic structure that has long since decayed, it would be a wonder of the world by any definition. But, you know, there's things online that you can read about the giant hedge. It's a really interesting read. Go Google it. But where I had a bit of value, and I found it really interesting, is then my mind goes, oh, how interesting that the Brits brought an eons-old tradition of traditional hedge laying halfway across the world and implemented it in India at such scale, but so sympathetically to the local terroir, because actually a lot of the plants that were incorporated into the hedge were the only ones that could not just survive, but thrive in a lot of the arid conditions up north. And so I thought about the concept of a traditional British hedge. A lot of it, for those who don't know, hedgerow fruits are a big component of British traditional cuisine. Our jams, jellies, and chutneys are full of greengages, brambles, black currants, things like that. And it turns out it was no different in the giant hedge, the Great Hedge of India. Most of the plants that made it up were edible. Things like Indian plum, jujube, prickly pear, gum arabic, and Bengal currant. Or my favorite old British name for this fruit, Christ's thorn. I mean, how ominously religious and descriptive, how evocative and enchanting a name. And I'll go on a little tangent. I really think we should go back to referring to fruits by their own old traditional names, and veg and everything else. I mean, wouldn't you love to go into a supermarket and be like, I'll have a kilo of Christ's thorns, please, some horns of plenty and Newton's wonders instead of some berries, mushrooms, and apples, eh? If that isn't a microcosm of the shitification and homogenization of modern society, I don't know what is. Anyway, back to the hedge. So I have a vision in my head of this beautiful fruit-laden hedge and thought, well, if it's such a part of traditional British cuisine, is there a possibility that some of these fruits could have been incorporated into British colonial food as well? So I started ravenously digging through some of my old colonial British cookbooks, and sure as shit, I found some recipes for, among other things, Bengal currant chutney. So as I go forward for my next few videos, I will be sharing my kind of journeys of discovery, making, among other things, Bengal currant chutney. In my head, I want to make a Christ's thorn wine. I think that's very fittingly religious. And I'll be sharing it with you guys. If you like it, let me know if this kind of stuff's interesting in the comments, and I'll try and kind of come up with more of it. And on a tiny little final slightly political side note, you know, I was reading about the Great Hedge, and it got me thinking about kind of all the barriers we're erecting at massive expense around the world right now to keep people out. And, you know, maybe we should relook at the idea of a great hedge. You know, at the very least, it would be cheaper. It would be a much needed carbon sink in our burning world. And, you know, instead of facing war-weary, tired migrants with the barrel of a gun, it might give them a little morsel for them to eat instead. But I digress. That's my own kind of personal take on it. But Bengal currants, I'll be sharing my future explorations with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Lots of love as always. Take care. Be safe.